This is Xane Anderson, and welcome to the Principal Podcast today. Today, I am absolutely excited to have Nick Garofalo, who is the founder of Openhanded Wealth. He's a guy who loves Jesus. He loves his wife. He loves his kids, which is, we all know, I'm passionate about as well. He's passionate about helping people solve their money problems. He likes to mountain bike. He's a certified financial planner candidate. He likes to play with his kids, likes to read, as do I. So we have a lot in common today. Nick, thank you for being on the show today.
Man, that's quite a long list of mutualities there that we both have in common. But man, X, it's great to be here, and it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
One of the things I think we're both passionate about is helping fathers right now in the world. And I think there's such a need. I think when we see things happening in the world, we see violence, we see corruption, we see dishonesty, we see problems. And a lot of people are saying, hey, let's throw money at it. Let's throw more social programs or less social programs, or let's have this politician solve it or that politician solve it. But if we look at the roots of these problems, Nick, what we're really seeing is these problems started in homes a decade or two ago, maybe three, maybe four, maybe more, where children didn't learn principles they needed. So we're seeing the fruits of some of that now in our society. And one of the things that, on the pre-chat on the show that was so impressive is we had this idea of how important fathers and parents, families, strong families really are. So I just want to thank you for being on the show today.
I mean, it's my pleasure. You're right when you talk about that being a passion, a mutual passion. I grew up in a home with a great dad, who loved me and worked hard for me and wanted to set me up, for success in life that he didn't have. And I want to be that for my kids. And it breaks my heart to see, the lack of that in different pockets of society, in different places, even, right up the road from me or right next door. And so it's an inspiration to me to want to pour into my kids and love them and show up for them, be present with them, be curious about them and care for them. And it's tough sometimes because I don't know, depending on like which side of the, like which side you're listening to on any given day, there's the, hustle, grind, achieve, build, grow your business. And there's all of that. And I think that's good. I think that it's exciting and it's energizing. And then there's the, be present with your kids and help your wife. And I don't like having to fall into one of these camps. I really think that it's possible to do this during the day. And then, man, I had this great chat with my friend the other day, and he was telling me about this. It was his advice to me. In fact, he said, if you really trust that God will provide for you, then you can unapologetically go to your office for 8 hours, work, grind, pray, do your thing, and unapologetically hang it up at the end of the day and go home and play with your kids and help your wife and make dinner and, be present there. And then the next day, do it again, right? Like you don't have to fall into like complete, there's a way to go about working and growing and building something in a way that can honor God and also not cost your family their connection with you. Now, like, yeah, I mean, your business or your work life is typically a monster that is never satisfied, right? That will never fully turn off and never say enough, right? So it takes an incredible amount of trust and discipline to turn it off at the end of the day and say enough, and then to go home. And I'm not the best at that. Don't mishear me at all. But yeah, it's something I'm very passionate about, is working, to not miss these years with my young kids, and also working really hard at the work that God's given me to do. So yeah.
I love that. And I think it is possible to do both. I love how you said to be unapologetic. And I've often found, for me personally, when I come home from working, or I'm done with the workday, if I'll just say a quick prayer and just say, help me to switch into dad mode, and
Yeah.
and I can even pray for each one of my children by name. and say something like, you know what, it's time for me to shift so I can leave that behind. And sometimes I haven't been great at it, but being able to say, hey, now I'm going to be a dad here. One of the things that you said that's really interesting, they did a study. I think it was McKinsey that did a study, and if I have the data, the study right, they said, even these big companies now, even companies on the S&P 500 are likely not going to last more than 18 years. And so, Nick, you and I could go into business together and make this amazing company, and statistically, give it a decade or two, it's probably going to be bought, sold, bankrupted, disrupted. It's not even going to be there. Now, it's still
Hmm.
important to do good business so we can do good in the world, but the much longer impact seems like um, the, the the influence that we're going to have with our children. And I'll give you one example, and I'd love to hear your opinion on it. I live in the United States of America. Why do I live here? Well, because many of my ancestors, hundreds of years ago in some situations, decided to come to the United States. Well, that was a decision they made in their family. That decision, even though it happened decades or centuries ago, it affects the language we're speaking right now today. It affects my economic opportunities. It affects my educational opportunities. It affects all of these things. And that's kind of and so, but whether or not they had a really cool horse or whether or not they had a few extra square feet where they lived doesn't affect me, right? And that's an obvious one because it's geographic. It's geographic, right? So, but just as real, but maybe less obvious is, were they kind? Were they nice? Were they checked in or checked out? Were they drunk or angry? Or all those kinds of things can be passed down for many, many generations. And so the impact we're going to have at home is going to far outlast anything that we do. And we're not going to care. Our great grandchildren, or even further, are not going to care if we had a few extra square feet. They're not going to care if we had a nicer car than the neighbor. They're not going to care about some of the things that we get hung up with these days. Love to hear your thoughts on that.
I love the fact that you said a cool horse.
Yeah, thanks. Did they have a cool horse? Was our horse a little bit better than the neighbor's horse? I mean, we get so caught up in this, am I keeping up with the Joneses kind of thing?
Okay, so this is particularly tough as a financial planner. Okay,
Mm.
because I have to walk the line of helping coach real people through the process of, well, to kind of two different sides. So there are the young people like me that find it hard to save for retirement, and so and hard for a few reasons. I mean, cash flow certainly is difficult at this stage of life, but then also, um, I mean, some deep thinking Christians trying to develop a theology of our retirement, trying to develop a theology of investing. That's difficult stuff to kind of parse. And maybe if you give it some attention, you don't really arrive at a solution. So you just kind of default to, well, I won't save right now. And it's easy to do. It's easy to just not save. And I mean, saving is hard. It's funny, actually, in the brain, saving for future you feels comparable to saving for your neighbor across the street. Our brains don't really connect that future you is you. It's nobody else, right? It's literally you. Um, it's just, there's this disconnect when saving. So saving is already hard. Okay, our brain's already kind of predispositioned against the idea of, that's future you's problem to figure out. Like, present me is going to enjoy spending the money. Future me can figure out his own problems, or her own problems later. So saving's already hard. Then if you throw in a nice little dose of Bible verses onto it, it gets even more complex. Of like, oh, wait a second, what about the rich fool or the rich ruler that Jesus said, sell everything you have, give it to the poor. And then you look throughout history, there's a lot of poor Christians that lived in poverty that were praised and kind of extolled by the church. And so, like, what is a Christian theology or biblical theology on possessions and retirement and investing and saving? And like, that's just more than I can handle. That's too complicated. Then you have the other people on this side that may not think as they may not think along those same lines. They've made plenty of money. They have lots of money. So they've saved lots of money. And so now they will live on their lots of money, and they'll still be generous and give, but they view their stewardship now as more a means of, or as more an exercise in being generous, being charitable. And they don't really have kind of the theological problem with having accumulated a lot, because Now they're in the phase of life where they're going to live off of that money, and they're really glad that they did. So these two different camps both have the same temptation. That's to find contentment and to find to find contentment outside of Christ, to find it either in possessions, the abundance of them, or the kind of pious lack of them, or in the relative comparison with other people around us, right? So going back to your cool horse story, it's like, well, your cool horse joke, it's like, well, whether or not you have a horse that's cooler than your neighbors is a lot less important than whether you are deriving some additional contentment or validation from the number on your account or the amount of accumulation you have or the lack thereof. Like if you're finding identity or validation in your wealth, either for or against it, there's a misalignment that we probably need to talk through. So I have a whole kind of like theology of investing that I have worked to develop and share with my clients to help them kind of sort through this. And I point to examples like, look at Joseph, right? 7 years of abundance, followed by 7 years of famine. God gave him a dream warning. So like he had to be diligent to save in the years of plenty for the coming years of drought. Okay, that's interesting. Obviously, that's a beautiful example that we praise and celebrate. What about the story of the ant, right? Go to the ant and consider her ways and be wise, because she stores up food in harvest for the coming time of winter. She doesn't have a ruler or a king that, like, and yet still, they march in rank and they do this together for the benefit of their species. Then, you even have the parable, right, of the talents, where the one that went out and doubled the investment, or the king left money to the different servants, and the two doubled their money and were praised. They were both praised equally for their performance. The one that did nothing, Jesus literally said in the parable, you should have at least invested it with the bankers, that I would have gotten interest at my return. That's one of the most bizarre lines I've ever heard come out of the mouth of Christ. I just can't understand, like, banking and interest. Like, what is the point of this story? It's so strange if you think about the context of Jesus and how people usually think of him and experience him. So anyway, we have a ton of data around human life and spending and healthcare needs and life expectancy. That's what the actuarial sciences are all about. And so we know that typically you start your career around 20, somewhere between 15 and 25, and you usually work until somewhere between 60 and 70, maybe 75. But eventually you're not going to be able to work in an economy and produce the economic value that justifies the pay you'll need to survive. Okay, so the bottom line is the last 10, 20, maybe 30 years of your life, you either won't be able to work or you won't be able to work at the same capacity you could earlier in your life. Okay, so if you think of like a line graph for a timeline, just a long flat line, and imagine a nice rainbow kind of arc, right? Growing up and then coming back and peaking and coming back down. That is your lifetime earning potential. Okay, it's going to grow until it peaks, probably in your 40s, maybe your 50s, maybe your 60s. And then it will eventually go down as you either retire or you're just, think about it this way. Like if you talk to somebody who's in their mid 70s, they're not in the same capacity of their mental acuity, mental sharpness, or just performance ability as somebody who's in their 40s, right? So as you approach the descent of that curve, you will have needed to save for the coming years of I don't want to call it famine, but in my analogy, it's analogous to that, right? So these coming years of need, during which time you will not be working and bringing in cash flow to support yourself and support your family and your spouse. So what do? Well, you can either be a burden on those that you've raised, right? So, and let them provide for you. You could be a burden on society, potentially. Nobody wants to do either of those. Or diligent earlier you will have saved and accumulated provision for the coming season of need, right? So that's kind of my thesis on why it's okay for Christians to save for retirement and what that can look like, right? It doesn't have to look like a yacht in the Bahamas. Okay, I don't think that mass accumulation of wealth far beyond the needs of you or your family is honoring to the Lord. I just don't think that it is. And I don't think that's what most people imagine when they think of retirement, right? But having, stored up in the years of harvest for the coming years of need, I think is a beautiful example of stewardship and of careful planning.
Nick, I appreciate that. Very, very well thought out response. And it is hard for when you think about scriptures, like, for example, when Christ says, take no thought for the morrow, for there's nothing evil to handle today, right? When you think about, where he commands the rich man to sell everything and give to the poor, um, versus the things, like you said, with Joseph, like, where we're going to have a plan to, for the lean years that are coming, the 7 good years versus the 7 lean years. It's a lot for us to try to juggle and try to think, what's the best thing to do this? How do I do that? So it's an interesting thought, and it still plays in with this, from an extreme standpoint. I've seen a lot of fathers who say, well, I want to make a ton of money so that I'm not a burden, but they take it a little too far and they spend their whole career going and making it such a big
Oh yeah.
that they miss their kids growing up, and they're gone all the time because they want to have that business that's going to serve. I mean, and so there's a lot to think about. How do I balance this so that I can be there for my children's most important formative years, or very important formative years, and still provide and still be able to save up for the lean years, right? And it's definitely a challenge.
Well, it's hard because especially when you're in the lean years, like
Yeah.
on paper, raising kids are lean years, and oh man, it takes so much faith and so much courage to kind of turn your back on your career growth for a decade or two and say, you know what, I could pursue this, but it's going to cost me time I don't have to give right now because I have to give that time to my family. It's the only shot I got. This is the only time that they're going to be this age. They'll never be this young again, and I don't want to miss it. And it takes so much courage and trust to say, you know what, God, I trust the development of my career to you. I trust the development of my business to you. I trust the promotion that I'm probably not going to get, or the offer that I might not get, that I'll get passed over for, because I want to make sure that I'm putting the time you've entrusted to me toward what will have the greatest kingdom impact. You mentioned too before the show, like, um, going back to the cool horse joke. I love that. So funny, but like, a few extra square feet in your house might be really, really nice. You might think, oh, our house is so small. I just wish. And man, I was talking to somebody just the other day. They're in a real crunch. They're renting an apartment. They're down to one car that's got problems. They're in a really painful cash crunch situation right now, and they're expecting their third child. Um, a bigger house would be so nice to them, right? But a bigger house is probably going to require mom to work outside the home. Well, if mom works outside the home, the kids are going to go somewhere, right? To grandma's, to daycare, to something. First off, a lot of the money is going to go straight back to the childcare expense that you're now incurring. Second, like you said earlier, it's like, is it worth it? I know it's hard right now. It's really hard. It's brutal, but like, you're with your kids. They're with you. Like, you can't just write off even the economic power of your investment into them now. It's not all just touchy feely and sentimental and, oh, you're there with your kids and it's sweet. Like, we get it. It's hard. We have little kids, but it's good. You're investing, into something so incredible that will truly touch generations. Which kind of, I guess, brings us to that story so when you and I first talked, you shared this crazy story, and we were talking about the generational impact of being an intentional dad. I don't know if you want to share that story.
Well, the generational impact, I'm not sure if I remember the story, but I will tell you one of the things you said here that gave me tingles as you were saying it. What we're really doing in life is raising kids who are going to touch the world in different ways that we don't even comprehend. And so my wife is lucky enough to stay home, and this is the way I think about it. My wife, who is the primary nurturer, she's able to stay home with our kids. She's an amazing woman. She's an amazing wife. She's got the most important job, which is to be a homemaker, to be home, to be with our children, to raise our children. I have kind of the secondary job which is to make it so that she can stay home and raise our children, right? So it's not that she stays home so I can go to work. It's I go to work so she can stay home and do the
Oh, that's
most important
beautiful.
job. Do you hear what I'm saying?
That's
So
that's beautiful.
you're right. If I decided to say, hey, we need more square footage, so you go get a job, the most important job of nurturing and taking care of and guiding and leading and protecting and doing all this, the wonderful things that my wife, who does an amazing job at raising our children, and I help, you know, what I mean, wouldn't be possible. So to have a good financial plan, so that especially as fathers, as men, so that we can, for the most that we the as much as we can, make it so that our wives can stay home and do the most important work.
Man, I couldn't say it any better. I mean, that's beautiful. And I think it was my Sunday school teacher right after we got married, at our last church. I think it was him who said something like every day on his commute to work, he would text or call his wife and say, "Hey, I just want to thank you for staying home. Your job is far more important than mine, and I'm just honored to be able to go to work to support you in your job." And man, that kind of upside down perspective, it's incredible. It's beautiful. Like
It's the
that
right
just
side up perspective because the world's upside
right.
down.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. I mean, that's a kingdom aligned perspective to say the parenting role and being in my kids' lives and teaching them and shepherding and discipling them is the most important thing I can do for the next 10 years, 20 years. And
And,
so,
and the truth is, the legacy that we leave, sometimes when people talk about leaving a legacy, they think about, well, I'm going to leave a financial legacy. And you could, but the real legacy is that spiritual legacy that you're talking about, that legacy of believing in Jesus Christ and making good choices and trying to, you know, be real, true followers of Jesus Christ and do the right thing and help people and serve and so that legacy is going to be so much more important later on than whether we leave them $1 million or 10 million bucks or whatever it is we're going to leave or nothing. I mean, if you look even at Jesus Christ's life, Jesus was a poor carpenter. He wasn't one of the hot shots, you know. If you look, let me tell you this: who were the hot shots during Jesus's time? Well, you probably had Herod, you might have had Pilate, you had Caiaphas, the high priest. We don't celebrate any of their birthdays. We celebrate. You hear what I'm saying? They were the hot shots at the time. They were the guys with the position and the power and the money and whatever else.
sure.
But Jesus Christ, who was a poor carpenter, was the one who made the most impact. And what we're trying to do is emulate that and let our children um, learn what's really important.
Yeah, and like let me riff on that for a second, because how did Jesus go about making the greatest impact? Who were the, what was the primary way that he went about making an impact on other people? I would argue it wasn't the miracles or signs. It wasn't even his teachings, because we don't really have record. And I'm not a theologian here, but like, I don't believe there's much in the way of record of people who were, you know, students of his teaching who were healed by miraculous signs and wonders that went on to give their lives and leave written records. Like my point is this, that like it was his disciples, it was the people that he had breakfast with and spent 3 years with and traveled with and rubbed elbows with for years, for 1,000 days in a row, and they became best friends. That he fried fish the morning after he rose from the dead. He went to the beach and saw the boys, and he fried them up a fish breakfast and called them in. Like, it was them, that they were the ones that went and ended up giving their lives in martyrdom for his name. Like, how could they not? How could they do anything else? That, like, Jesus was their best friend. He was their everything. He was their life and their love and their direction and their best friend. They would do anything for him, up to give their lives. And they wrote down record for us to read today of the stories and the miracles and the teachings of Jesus. And yes, that all matters and it's all impactful. But like, going back to your point about leaving a legacy, I've never sat across the table from someone who teared up talking about the millions of dollars that their parents left for them. Never once. Many, many times, though, I've sat across the table or sat next to someone who tears up talking about the relationship and the friendship they had with their dad, their mom, their grandfather, whether or not they left them a penny. It was that type of a intimacy, of a closeness, of a friendship. Even as adults, these are people who are in their 60s and 70s still tearing up talking about how much she loved her daddy and how she was a daddy's girl at 70 something years old. Like that's the impact he had, and his love for her and her love for him, and they both love Jesus. So it's like that's the legacy I want to leave. Way more than any sort of financial planning resource or tool could help. So 100%.
That's exactly right. And that's one of the things that I think is great in what you're doing, Nick, where you're trying to help Christian business owners, people who are devoted, who are believers in Jesus Christ, to make good financial Christian-based decisions. I mean, that's wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, just starting with the perspective that, hey, I don't own this, I'm just a manager. And if I'm just a manager, then I have to ask, what would the owner of these assets do with them, right? Whether it's money or time or relationships, what would the owner do? How would he manage these? And then I want to do that.
Isn't that such a profound, as you said that, I could just feel it. When you really think, hey, this time really isn't mine. We're so tempted to think, hey, I have this time and this is my day, it's my week, it's my money.
Right.
If I just take it from a stewardship perspective where it's like, you know what, how can I best use this money, this time that I have to serve? Lord, what do you want me to do with it? Right?
Yeah. Well, and even beyond that, it's like, well, Lord, what would you do with this time? What would you do with this morning, this weekend, this money, this relationship? Um, and then do that thing. Like it kind of takes the pressure off, right? We don't have to figure it all out and then map out some brilliant plan. Like he wants to co-labor with us. That was the whole point. Like in the garden, when Adam and Eve were working and tending the garden, the moment that God comes walking through the garden in the cool of the day, that was not the first time he ever did that. I mean, the text makes it pretty clear. Like this was a regular thing. Like he and Adam would go for walks and talk. And as he came looking for Adam in the cool of the day and didn't find him, that was, of course, when we come onto the scene and we realize, what's happened with sin entering the world. But like God made the world and set people in it to multiply, exercise dominion, create and design and build and innovate. And he wants to do it with us. He's a very creative, very co-laboring type of God. And he built us in his image. So like we're just trying to work with him in doing the work, being about the work that he, like Jesus said, I must be about the work that the Father is doing. That's what we want to do in our planning and our money. And my passion is helping people bring that kind of order into their financial situation. A lot of people don't come with like, oh, my money's falling, my financial life is falling apart. Typically it's like, hey, I just don't really know what to do. I'd love some advice. I'd love some some management perspective, or I'd love, I don't know how to invest, because we live in a modern world, right, where we have to make these decisions, and there are ETFs and there are taxes and there are just investment and financial tools and things that we kind of need to know about. And it's gotten complicated. And so my passion is helping people come in and bring clarity and order and systems to what can feel very chaotic and stressful, so that they can, go about stewarding and managing in the way that God's calling them to do. Right. I mean, just yesterday I had a conversation with a client. He's probably going to make a financial move that on paper doesn't make tax sense. It's probably going to cost him in taxes more than it's going to, like what he wants to do is probably not going to be the most tax efficient thing. But that doesn't matter in the end, because the reason he wants to do it is because he feels like God's given him a mission and he wants to do it. And he's like, I'm ready and I don't want to just wait. I think we should just pull the trigger and let's go. It's like, sweet, let's do it. Because it's at the end of the day, it's not always about what makes the most efficient sense on paper, right? And I think that's again, that's where I love to come and meet people and help them navigate that space.
That's right. And I think as we think about it, the time we have is so valuable. For those, you may, some of the listeners may know this. Like my mom passed away when I was 8 years old. She was 32 years old, had 7 children. I'm sure at some point I don't think she ever would have expected that she was going to die at age 32 with 7 children. Um, but she did. And the little tiny things that she did, Nick, um, I remember little things she said, little things she did, things that she wanted, that I found out later that have a profound, profound influence on me to this day. And so when your friend here is saying, "Hey, he feels called to do something," and he's needs to go do something, and even though it doesn't make maybe as much sense from a long-term financial perspective, the truth is it's possible that he may not be around to do that. I'm not hopeful he will be, but none of us know
No,
when
you're
we're
right.
when we're going to have the time. And so to listen to those promptings that we have to move in a certain direction, sometimes they don't make sense. And that's okay. Like sometimes you just got to do stuff that doesn't make sense and know that you're doing the right thing anyway. Right.
Wow. Yeah, I mean that's I don't think I could say it better. I'm curious, what's one of those things that your mom did that really when you were saying that, it seemed like there was something even you were thinking of.
Well, I could tell you a story. Let me tell you just a little tiny thing.
Sure.
Uh, my mom, she wanted me to, I used to like to draw trees, kind of draw them with every leaf, every detail, even the veins in the leaves. I went to school, saw how the other children drew trees. They'd just draw them with 2 lines with the poofy cloud on top. Well, when I went to school and saw the other children drew trees, I stopped drawing them the way I used to, and I started drawing them the way the other children did. And I found out later that my mom, when she saw this, she cried. She really cried. Well, after my mom died, and I was there in the room when she passed away, she had a cerebral hemorrhage, and her she died very suddenly. She went from being healthy to just gone. We could, but you know, even now, right now, Nick, I'm sharing my heart with you, and I'm sharing heart with our listeners, and figuratively, just by sharing this with you and whoever's listening to this podcast, I'm figuratively drawing trees the way I see them, sharing my heart with you and others. So just
Hmm.
things like that. My mom was a strong believer in Jesus Christ, and I knew that. And that, even though I've made plenty of mistakes throughout my life, done a lot of things that my mom probably would not be proud of, I've always known that she was a believer of Jesus Christ and that and that has been a strength and a good thing for me throughout my life. So thank you for asking.
Man, what I hear in that story, trees and veins, I imagine my own boys, watching them draw and appreciating the intentionality that they bring to the world and the little creative ways that they just see the world differently. And I imagine that your mom saw that in you and loved it. Um, and then the world molds us, right? It's like, oh no, X kids don't draw trees like that. They just draw them like this, nice and simple. Isn't that easier? You should be like everyone else. And we listen to the world most of the time. Um, and we don't have to. Right. And so man, thank you for sharing that. It's a really neat story of just the idea of, I mean, God, when God made you, he had someone in mind, right? Who did he have in mind when he made you, when he meant you? What did he have in mind when he formed you? Well, live into that and ask him and be curious and express that individually because that's how he's designed you to be. So, man, thanks for sharing. That's a beautiful story.
Thanks, Nick. Give me tingles when you say that. Thank you. Appreciate it. Um, Goodness, this has been such a great conversation. I don't know. I'm a little speechless right now, and usually I'm not. It's been a great conversation.
It's been my pleasure. I've enjoyed it. And I think, we've covered a lot of ground from, you know, the intentionality of being a parent. I love the right side up way of seeing investing in your kids and staying home, or like going to work so your spouse potentially could stay home. All the way through to some practical thoughts and perspectives on finance. It's yeah, I agree. It's been a great chat, but man, it's been a pleasure to be on the show. I love what you're doing. I love what you're about, and I think this is the kind of mission that that I love to align with and to get behind. So thank you for having me. Thanks for inviting me.
Nick, thank you for being on the show today. Let me ask you this: how can people get a hold of you?
Yeah. Well, so I've got a couple free gifts for your listeners. They can go to openhandedwealth.com/freebies. Just my free giveaways for anybody that's listening that's interested. So openhandedwealth.com/freebies. I've got some resources on there for things like ideas or ways to save on taxes as a business owner, building your first cash flow plan if you've never made one, some basics of biblically based investing, and how at Open-Handed Wealth I approach investing differently from the traditional financial planner or advisor. And so if anybody wants to, if anybody listening would like to book a call with me or to schedule a time, I'd be thrilled. I'd love to meet your listeners.
Wonderful. So openhandedwealth.com/freebies. We'll put that in the show notes for those of you who are driving and want to look this up later. And Nick Garofalo, thank you so much for being on the show today. It's been an honor having you. And for any of our listeners who would like some good biblically based investing advice, please feel free to reach out to Nick. Thank you again, Nick.
Yeah, my pleasure, X. Thanks so much.